Hi everyone, it's Wednesday Warriors and it's me, Arielle. And this week I'm going to be talking about struggles that are often faced in recovery when you're physically healthy again. Because sometimes when you're physically healthy, that can actually be one of the hardest parts of the recovery journey. There are a bunch of videos I've done in the past that have been on topics related to this because we've certainly talked about a wellness toolbox, a coping bank, things that you can do that are healthy coping mechanisms when things do get tough or stress gets the better of you. I've done videos on stress specifically. I've done videos about returning to school or work once you are more solid in recovery and how to know if you're ready and that can be a struggle. I've done a video on well-intended comments from other people and how to deal with that. I've also done many videos on body image and body image issues, which are not things that everyone struggling with an eating disorder deals with, but certainly something that is noteworthy for many people. What I'm going to do today is read you something I called Remembering the Realization. And it's the best way that I've been able to describe my turning point. I was already in recovery for quite a while from my eating disorder at a certain point in college when, even though I was doing things to push my recovery forward, I still was kind of stuck, and I really did have to make some choices to sort of go all the way and to let the eating disorder go. And this explains this. From the beginning, from the start of my descent into an eating disordered life, I've always known I wanted to stop. I didn't want to have an eating disorder any more than anyone wants to have any other disease. I knew it was unhealthy, and I knew I needed help. Before I told anyone about my struggles, before I was confronted, and before I had even come to terms with my issues, I went to see a counselor. I remember making the appointment. It all seemed so surreal. I was your average girl who watched TV and saw anorexic girls on talk shows, skin and bones, crying their eyes out in front of the camera. I never thought I would relate to the girls on those couches, talking about their fears of food and their distressing disease. But suddenly, almost before I knew what was happening, I was on my way to anorexia myself. And it wasn't long before I was diagnosed with the very same disorder I had often heard about on television. At my consultation appointment at my college campus's counseling center, I recall explaining my daily habits, my calorie counting obsession, and my way of fasting. I could hear myself saying the words, knowing full well I had a serious problem, or at least the beginnings of one. From that point, even though I sought help, was confronted by my best friend, and told my parents, I ended up getting worse before I got better. Sometimes I even got better, only to get worse again. Things weren't clicking in my head. The constant struggle became so normal to me and so strangely comforting. I used anorexia to cope with stress, to deal with change, to help me feel special. All the while, I still hated it. I'd get angry every time I went to see a doctor who told me I should be weighing a certain number. Not only did the very thought seem ridiculous to me, it also agitated me, because I always wondered how I'd look at a higher weight. Always somehow knew, deep down, that a grown woman should be weighing much more than I did, and, well, should look more like a woman. Even when I got better and better, and I managed to eat enough to be considered okay, I was still constantly struggling with mental aspects of anorexia. Sometimes I was even annoyed, because I thought everyone around me assumed I was fine again, simply because I weighed a certain amount. It was so untrue and so hard to explain. At times, I was the furthest thing from fine. I've always been one of those people who can put on a happy face, who can smile even when they are hurting and joke around, consistently concealing the emotions at battle inside. In a way, it sometimes helped not to talk about it. I liked trying to forget, to be able to have a good time with friends, if only for a few fleeting hours. It was sad because something always seemed to fall. I always seemed to fall. I wanted to enjoy myself, to be happy with my friends, to let my mind free itself of numbers and perfection, but I could never enjoy myself completely. It was like I was at a party, having a blast with a big smile on my face, but there was someone in the corner, wearing dark clothes and looking at me with a scary expression. My eating disorder, my inside pain and dissatisfaction, was that dark, scary someone in the corner. I could still have a great time, could still make great memories, but I was always being watched by something that wanted to take it all away. When I think of times like this, I am reminded particularly of a few nights out with my college friends, when we'd drink and have a good time dancing and laughing. And on the way home, when the alcohol had loosened the strings around my turbulent emotions, I'd start to cry relentlessly. It's kind of embarrassing, even now, but I was much more of a mess than I let myself or anyone else believe. Tears typically accompany a mess. Whether I cried walking home from a bar, feeling as though I was completely ruining the carefree mood, or later in the night, back at my old apartment to my best friend, everything seemed to come crashing down after having fun. It took me a while to learn that I'd never really be able to be happy again unless I fixed myself first. Until I took care of what was making me hurt, any fun or happiness was temporary. I knew I didn't want to live like that. After all, who would? Looking back, nights like that feel like a turning point, or several of them. I knew my entire life was going to be like that if I didn't change something. If I hadn't had the friends I do, I would have fallen into a sad little hole and lied there till something drastic finally pulled me out, if anything pulled me out at all. This realization came after years of unhappiness and what can only be described as hell. This realization came after a freshman year of college that makes me cringe to this day. After days and nights of worrying my friends, of sleeping in the daytime for hours at a time, of letting my past of being a straight A student fall into the trash as I used all my effort to even make it to and through classes. After tedious meals in the dining hall, whole biology classes spent incessantly tallying my food intake, and one distinctly frightening night when I attempted to measure my dwindling waist by fastening a belt around it, then trying to measure the belt with a ruler, only to be stopped by my freshman roommate and my best friend, who both had to hold me down on my bed while I thrashed around and essentially freaked out. After counseling and eating again, only to make my sophomore year a near repeat of my freshman year. After group therapy and fainting spells, after screaming matches with my parents, after actually seeing a very scary number on the scale at one point and hating the sick euphoria that went with it, after obsessive term papers on eating disorders in an attempt to teach myself to stop what I was doing. After all this came those fun college nights that ended in tears. And after that came the realization that I didn't want to and couldn't do it anymore. So I set out to learn myself, and I discovered a lot. It has to start with you. It has to start with you. But most of all, it has to start